Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In the last video I did a review of the old Beatdown box set, which was essentially like a proto-dual deck, and I thought I'd carry on with that and keep looking at more kind of like these obscure box sets that, maybe don't get as much kind of attention or, are talked about as much, but I think are still important parts of Magic the Gathering's history. So with that in mind, we're going to look at actually the box set that preceded Beatdown, which is Anthologies, which is I suppose this is the absolute absolute first kind of project I suppose you could call a dual deck. So Anthologies was a box set like this as it looks here. It comes with two pre-constructed decks made to be played against each other. It was primarily, I think, just a big storage box. You could use it just to store cards after you'd taken the decks out, which is why it's such a big box. And I also think it contained like a small booklet that had some input there from Richard Garfield himself, which was kind of just discussing sort of like the past, present, and I believe the sort of like the future of Magic the Gathering. I have no idea what was actually in that booklet, so if you do have some sort of if you do have a copy of that, that's probably something worth holding on to. So Anthologies was released late 1998, right in the middle of Urza's. As you can see here, it's like listed as like the first kind of box set like this. And there were like sort of like 2-player starter sets or starter kits like before then, but this was the first one that was really like I guess like aimed at sort of expert level, in that fact they weren't kind of just vanilla cards intended to teach you how to play the game. This was a product you were meant to buy and sort of like with a friend, play it out of the box, like the two decks against each other, sort of build up your collection that way. The decks contain cards from like every set that had been released up to now, because it was sort of in a way a sort of a celebration set. It was celebrating Magic's like 5th anniversary, so in that way they were kind of paying homage to some of the previous sets and stuff. So I think that's kind of like a fun idea, and it's a nice reason to release a box set like this. But we'll get into it and look at the decks that came inside and like whether they were, if it was a product kind of worth buying. I think it still was in terms of sort of like collector's value. But yeah, as you'll see as we look through this, it really is kind of like the foundation for like what dual deck sort of became, and I would say even like what Beatdown like sort of a year later built on. So this is really kind of like the first draft of this kind of project. I think it did sort of an okay job, but let's take a look into it. So the first deck is called Defenders of the Cause, which is a white and green deck. I'm just going to eschew the normal deck list we got here. But the two decks are very, very similar. They both got like 25 land, about 23 creatures, and the rest are a mix of instant sorceries, enchantments, that kind of thing. But yeah, we're just going to dive into it, and they're all singletons like we saw with like the Beatdown thing. So yeah, really high variance in these decks. I'm not sure how the play experience would have been, but yeah. So, we're going to zip through these as well because like they're older cards and they're kind of like a bit simpler to understand. One important thing as well is that this was not established in Anthologies. It started with Beatdown, these kind of box sets where the cards used in there had like had an expansion symbol that was used specifically for that product. So for example, in Beatdown, it had like that little kind of mace symbol. As we'll see in dual decks, they get their own kind of expansion symbol to identify that card's been reprinted for that particular product. Here, it was just like completely original printing as that card was when it was originally released, or whatever set it's drawing from. There are some instances where that there are a few misprints throughout this product, which is actually kind of another reason why it's has sort of like some collector value, I suppose, because there's a lot of misprints, as we'll see. I've highlighted the most outstanding ones, but there are a few others relating to, I say, expansion symbols or artwork that don't match up. But yeah, it's really interesting if you look into how the number of misprints and what type of misprints they are in this project. Anyway, let's just, zip through these because they're quite simple cards. So the green-white deck. So we got single Sarah Angel, which is the lovely original Douglas Schuler art. 3 double white, 4/4 flying vigilance. Yep, classic Sarah Angel. Really nice card to include, I think, because I would say this is one of the most iconic cards of Magic at the time, like early Magic. So yeah, really, really nice to include that. So Armored Pegasus is our first misprint. So it has a mana value here of 2 and a white. It should be 1 and a white. So yeah, this is one of many cards where it has the mana value misprinted. Not sure how so many misprints got through, but they did, and that would be an interesting story, I think, to dig down into why there were so many misprints. But yeah, it's just 1/2 flyer. And you can see here, kind of what I was talking about, like where it's using, I guess, kind of like the original printing and stuff. So this has come from a portal set, which is why the game, yeah, why the text of it, the card is like centralized, why it's in bolded, why you've got this divider line between the rules text and the flavor text. So yeah, it's really feels like a big mishmash here of like styles throughout the decks. Freewind Falcon, 1 white for a 1/1 flying pro red. Yep. Basically, like the aim of the deck is kind of stall out the ground and kind of win in the air. It's green white skies, I suppose you could say that, or yeah, something like that. Single Pegasus Charger, well, single of all these cards actually. 2 and white, 2/1 flying first strike. Yep. Single Combat Medic, 2 and white for a 0/2, 1 and white prevent 1 damage to a creature or player. Yeah, I suppose. And then Samite Healer, so another misprint here on the mana cost. Should be 1 and white again. For a 1/1, tap to prevent 1 damage to a creature or player. Yep, this is classic Samite Healer, who got reprinted a lot. Benelish Knight, 2 and a white for a first strike and flash, which is a card I think is still sort of okay by today's standards. Yeah, I used to really like Benelish Knight because it got reprinted in a core set with really nice artwork. So yeah, Benelish Knight is a really solid card in here, I think. Order of the White Shield from Ice Age, 2 white mana for a 2/1 pro black, and spend 1 white to give it first strike turn, or spend 2 white to give it +1/+0 turn. Single White Knight, double white for a 2/2 first strike protection for black, another like really classic early Magic creature here. White Knight, yep. This completely gives the finger to half of the other deck because there's just no way around it. Single Youthful Knight, 1 and white for a 2/1 first strike. Yep. A single Icatian Javeliers with new. Is it new artwork? It won't be new artwork, is it? Because it is a reprint. It's not like we're not at the point where like these versions are getting exclusive artwork or anything. But there is like the old quite janky artwork where it's a bunch of guys in like red masks hanging around. It's so weird. At least this one actually kind of looks like a javelin here, I suppose. But this is really cool. It's essentially like a white prodigal sorcerer that you can use once. So 1 white mana for a 1/1. When it comes to play, you put a javelin counter on it. You can tap, remove a javelin counter from it. It does 1 damage to a creature or player. So really interesting white ping creature, I suppose. Single infantry veteran, 1 white mana for a 1/1, taps to give it a attacking creature +1/+1 till end turn, sure. Urnham Jin. So it's really interesting that we had Urnham Jin reprinted in Beatdown, and we got him here as well. Again, probably because it was just like a really iconic, efficient creature for the time. So 3 and a green for a 4/5 junior upkeep. A target non-wall creature and opponent controls gains Forest Walk until your next turn. So the idea is, I guess, you give a creature that you probably couldn't block or deal with anyway, or like a small creature, you basically make it unblockable. That's the drawback for having a 4/5 with no abilities for 4 mana, which at the time was like a really efficient stat line. And then we have Miri, Cat Warrior. So 1 and double green. Two misprints on this. So she's got her release set symbol from Exodus, which should be gold because she was a rare creature, and also her power toughness is wrong. She should be a 2/3. But this is something I really like about the old legendary creatures, where like rather than just use the type line to give her creature types, you have to do this whole thing of like legend is the creature type, and then we have to also say like, oh, she counts as a cat warrior. Like, just why couldn't cat warrior legend also like be in the type line? It's so crazy they never seem to consider that. But yeah, for the time, Miri was also pretty good. Like 3 mana for like first strike, Forest Walk, and Vigilance on like for 3 mana is like pretty good. Yeah, I suppose. The Forest Walk obviously doesn't matter because there's no, the other deck is red black. But being like first strike and Vigilance for like 3 mana and should be 2/3 is pretty good. I don't know, maybe if there was, it wouldn't have been at the time of like online errata or something to say like, or like an online reminder saying like, oh, we know these cards are printed like this, like it should be this. I wonder how that misprint was handled at the time. If you were around at the time, please let me know. Like, stick a comment below. I'd really like to know how the misprints were kind of dealt with in like kind of that early internet age. That'd be really interesting to know, actually. We've got Gorilla Chieftain, 2 and double green for 3/3 with 1 green to regenerate it, which is like perfectly fine. I like that. Canopy Spider, 1 and a green for 1/3 reach, and then Giant Spider, 3 and a green for a 2/4 with reach, so yep, just slightly grown up Canopy Spider. And then a Woolly Spider, so 1 and double green for a 2/3 with reach. When it blocks a creature flying, it gets +0/+2 till end of turn. So a whole page of various spiders there. Apologies to all the people out there with arachnophobia. And then a single Llanowar Elves, which it feels a shame. I feel like we could have had like slightly more mana dorks, I suppose. But this is okay. Again, like really classic Llanowar Elves in here. You gotta have Llanowar Elves in a project that's celebrating kind of like the first 5 years of Magic's history. And then a Scavenger Folk, who is where will you be when the acid hits? So 1 green mana for a 1/1. 1 green, tap, sacrifice it, destroy an artifact, which is actually at the time pretty efficient artifact destruction, I suppose. Like on a 1-drop and only 1 to activate, that's actually pretty good. And considering it came out of the dark as well, which was not a great expansion either. I mean, it's an early expansion. That's not fair to say it's not great. It was okay for the time, I suppose. But yeah, actually, I would say even by today's standards, actually quite efficient in terms of artifact destruction. Like there's no cost limit on it or anything, so this is actually sort of all right. And then Spectral Bears, so 1 green for 3/3. So real powerhouse by early Magic standards. 2 mana for 3/3. But when it attacks, if the defending player controls no black cards, it doesn't untap during your next untap step. Luckily, the other deck is red-black, so this drawback might not even sort of go off that often. So yeah, pretty efficient early Magic beat stick, I suppose. And then a single carnivorous plant, 3 and a green for a 4/5 wall. It should have defender, but this is early Magic where wall and legend are the only creature types that have inherent unwritten rules text. So yeah, I think these days it is a plant wall, and it obviously has like defender now. So yeah, can't attack with it because I say the wall creature type had inherent rules text to it. I think this is also a misprint. I think I didn't circle this one. It has the wrong expansion symbol. I think it's got legends here. I think it should have the dark. I think it's when Carnivorous Plant was released. Anyway, yeah. And then a single Ranger Envec, 1 a white and a green for a 2/2 first strike, and 1 green to regenerate. This showed up in one of the very, very first decks I reviewed on this channel, which was the Swarm when it was in Tempest, and I still stand it by. This is sort of still an okay card, even by today's stands. Probably not like as good as it was when it came out, but when it came out, I think this would have been really solid, like 3 mana for a 2/2 with first strike, and then also really cheap regeneration. Yeah, I think it's still like pretty good by today's standards, I suppose. Right, and then we got a single Sacred Mesa, 2 and a white for an enchantment. During your upkeep, you have to sacrifice a Pegasus or sacrifice Sacred Mesa, and you pay 1 white to make a 1/1 white Pegasus creature token. So this is really, really nice, I think, and it actually got like a reprint. I was going to say fairly recently in a modern Commander set or Commander deck, I think. But yeah, this is actually really, really nice, I think, and sort of like by the annoying thing is obviously you have to play it and then immediately make a Pegasus. So you can't really play this unless you've got 5 mana open, because you need to play it and then immediately make a Pegasus. So next turn you can sacrifice the Pegasus to keep it around. Yeah, but then after that, as long as you can keep pumping out more than 1 Pegasus from it per turn, then you can keep it around. Then it's a really efficient kind of mana sink for just making 1/1 flyers, which is pretty good, I think. And the red-black deck doesn't really have any way of dealing with flyers. And then we also got Pegasus Stampede. So 1 white has buyback, sacrifice a land, so you can sacrifice a land in addition to paying its other cost. And if you do, Pegasus Stampede goes back into your hand instead of graveyard as part of the effects. That's really nice. If you've got excess land later in the game, you can do that. Put Pegasus token into play, and it's a 1/1 white flying creature. Blah 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 blah. And then this is absolutely wild. Armageddon. Just casually throw that in here. Armageddon, 3 and a white, destroy all lands. Yep. Early Magic was really, really wild. Like we'll have like really kind of expensive, inefficient creatures, but we'll have like a 4 mana like destroy all lands, absolutely fine, and grind the game to an absolute halt. Obviously, this plays into it being kind of like an old school kind of like control deck. Like you would just get enough on the board that you need to win. And then you would blow up all lands and kind of stop your opponent doing anything, and you've already got everything you need. This also combos with Urnum Jin, the classic, what was it, Ernageddon? I think that was what it was called. So if you blow up all the lands, then Urnum Jin's drawback is not a drawback because, like, oh, you give Forest Walk something, you've blown up all the lands, there's no forests around anymore, so you've kind of given no drawback at all whatsoever. But yeah, it's really wild that Armageddon's in here. Really, really crazy. And then a single disenchant, 1 white, destroy artifact or enchantment. Yep. Source to Plowshares. This is a really nice inclusion as well. 1 white mana, exile a creature and controller gains life equal to its power. Yep. Source to Plowshares. Still to this day, one of the most efficient white removal spells. And then another misprint here on Warriors Honor, except this misprint actually makes it better. So Warriors Honor should be 2 and a white, which is an absolute tragic cost for instant speed just to give all your creatures +1/+1. So this misprint actually makes it better. But as I say, even at 2 mana, it's like barely serviceable just to give +1/+1. But again, early Magic, like it would have been okay, I suppose. And then Grak's back. We haven't had Grak in what feels like forever, so it's really nice to see Grak again. And I think this is like the original printing, the original artwork, because I don't think Pacifism. Yeah, because this is from Mirage, isn't it? So I don't think Pacifism was printed before then. So yeah, Mirage is the first time we got Pacifism. It's the first time we got Grak. So there we go. Lovely, lovely Grak. And then Giant Growth. Yep, classic green pump spell. Overrun, 2 and triple green to give all your creatures +3/+3 and trample 10 turn. Yep, classic kind of board wide pump, and usually win the game off that. And then a single hurricane, X and a green, does X damage to each creature with flying and each player. This kind of hurts you more in this deck, just because the red and black deck barely has anything with flying, whereas this deck has got obviously a ton of stuff with flying. It is, I suppose, an indirect way of winning the game as well, because it is like rare non-red burn. It's essentially green burn because it damages players as well. So you could use it to like push the last like 2 or 3 damage through after you've attacked with a bunch of flyers. Maybe so that's an option there. But yeah, it's still maybe a weird inclusion to have. Then a single Jalum Tome, 3 mana for an artifact. 2 tap, draw a card, then choose and discard a card. Obviously super expensive by today's standards, but I've sort of said it before. Like most early Magic artifacts were like, I guess priced, or well, they were either. I guess they were made weak because like maybe the philosophy was like, oh, they can go into any deck, so we got to make them kind of weak. So like I know it still maintains like color identity, like what certain colors can and can't do. Maybe. I mean, for the time, this was fine. I suppose. Like 2 just to draw and discard is sort of all right. I suppose. But then Serrated Arrows is actually fantastic, I think. So 4 mana artifact comes into play with 3 arrowhead counters on it. If there are no arrowhead counters on Serrated Arrows, you destroy it, and it is destroy. So if you do find a way of making it indestructible, then then you just get to keep it, I suppose, for no reason. Tap, remove an arrowhead counter from Serrated Arrows and put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So this is really nice, actually. I think just being able to spread up to 3 -1/-1 counters around. Yeah, pretty good, and it actually gets reprinted many years later in another dual deck, I think with nice new artwork as well. So really is a testament to kind of how efficient it kind of was. And this was in Homelands, which like was regarded as like one of the worst sets ever. So yeah, really nice little card to include here. And then we have a single Pendelhaven, a legendary land, taps to give you green, and taps to make a 1/1 creature, give it +1/+2 to 10, which is all like the Pegasus tokens, and you got a bunch of other weenies in here as well. So yeah, technically better than a forest, just because it doesn't come into play tapped or anything. So yeah, that's pretty cool to have that in here. Then we got Brushlands. So we got like both these decks have Painlands in them, which is kind of okay. Taps give you colors, or taps give you white or green, but it does 1 damage to you. Yeah, so that's fine. It's kind of nice to have like the original Painlands in here as well. And then Drifting Meadow and Slippery Cast, which are cycling lands from Urza's. This is just fine to include these. And then 11 Plains and 10 Forests. So that's kind of okay, that deck, I think. I say it's sort of a more grindy, control-y, I say like white-green skies, which is not usually a strategy or a archetype we usually see. Right, so then the other deck is Black-Red Dark Alliance. So we'll get into that one. Same as the other deck. It's all singletons, roughly the same number of creatures, and versus spells and non-creature spells. So yeah, let's just get into that and have a look at it. So there is kind of like a goblin tribal element to it as well, but it's still early Magic where it's kind of pre-onslaught. So the goblin tribal is not as strong as it could be because onslaught blockers really when I suppose like tribal decks as a whole like really kicked off because it's just got so many strong iconic cards in there. So this is kind of early Magic attempt at like a tribal deck, and it does its best, I think, as best it can do in a deck where like you only got 1 copy of each card, but and we'll see into it. Right, so we got a Goblin King, 1 and double red for a 2/2. All goblins get +1/+1 and gain Mountain Walk. And so this is this is old style Magic Lord of gives the benefit to all goblins on the table, whether you control them or not. So if you were playing a Goblin Mirror match, guess what? You've just kind of hurt yourself by doing this. The Goblin King is also not a goblin himself because, as discussed with Miri, God forbid we put more than one creature type into the type line. So he is just a Lord. So later printings do make him a goblin, but then they change the text, say all other goblins, so he doesn't give himself his own benefit. So yeah, just it's just so weird. Like, just put Goblin Lord in the in the type line. It's just it's right there. But anyway, the Mountain Walk side again doesn't matter because the other deck is obviously green white if you're playing these against each other. So really, this is just giving all the goblins +1/+1. We've got single goblin matrons, so this is from one of the portal sets, Portal 2, I think. So 2 in red for a 1/1. When goblin matron comes into play, you may search your library for a goblin card. If you do, reveal the card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library afterwards. Obviously, you would mostly search up Goblin King, but some of the other goblins, yeah, there's potential here as well. Goblin matron, I think, is pretty good, and I think it's been reprinted a few times as well. So then we've got Goblin Recruiter, which is kind of crazy. So 1 red for a 1/1. When it comes into play, search your library for any number of Goblin cards, reveal them to all players, shuffle your library, and then put the revealed cards on top of it in any order. So from what I remember, this is one of the cards in the deck that actually has like quite a high secondary market value. Obviously, right? Because like if you're playing Goblin Tribal, you play this, and then you just search up every goblin you need and just stack the top of your deck with all the goblins, and then obviously then you could have a bunch of other effects that like reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's goblins, you get it straight into play, that kind of stuff. So yeah, the really, really crazy effect, but like not amazingly well future proofed, honestly. The fact it can be any number is absolutely insane. So yeah, really, really nice little card to include here. But I say early Magic days, there just weren't enough goblins for this to really matter, I suppose. But like, there's still enough in this deck that you could like search them all up and like just stack the top of deck and just like, right, well, the next 6 turns I'm going to be drawing goblins that I need. So yeah, it's possible. So Mog Raider, this is another misprinted mana cost. It should be only a single red mana. 1/1, and you sacrifice a goblin to give a creature +1/+1 turn. That's okay. And then we've got Mog Fanatic, the Mog, the legend himself. So 1 red mana for a 1/1, sacrifice it, does 1 damage to target creature or player, which is like, by today's standards, I guess, kind of okay. But back in the day, when combat damage used to use the stack, Mog Fanatic was an absolute all-star because you'd either attack or block with him, do 1 damage to whatever it was blocking or that it was blocked by, and then sacrifice it and do 1 extra damage to another creature or like to the player itself. So yeah, Mog Fanatic was really, really crazy. So really, you could view this as kind of a one mana 2/1 in that way, because you could like maybe play it, swing with it. If it hit a player, 1 damage on the stack, pop it and do 1 extra damage from its ability. So really, really good card, like back in the day when combat damage used to use the stack. And I'm sure I'll get comments from some older players, probably my generation, of still lamenting that combat damage doesn't use the stack anymore. But whether for good or evil, we're where we are now, I suppose. And then we've got Mog Flunkies, so 1 red for 3/3. Can't attack or block unless another creature you control attacks or blocks at the same turn. I'd say a minimal drawback because it's a very aggro deck. So kind of like the striped bears in the spectral bears in the other deck. It's it's a fairly efficient 3/3 for the time. So yeah, this is okay. A single Goblin Mutant, 2 and double red for 5/3 with trample. Can't attack if defending player controls an untapped creature with power 3 or more. Goblin Mutant cannot block a creature with power 3 or more. So classic red creature with horrible drawback. I suppose like at the time it's like efficiently costed like 4 mana for a 5/3 trample, which like would have been so we got to stick a crazy drawback on it, right? So Although the white-green deck doesn't have a bunch of like really big creatures, I suppose. So like that second ability is the can't attack is maybe it's not such a big deal, and like it can't block a creature with power 3 or more. That's fine, I suppose. Like I suppose you don't want to be blocking with this. Like if you can be attacking with it, obviously you want to do that because obviously it's a much better attacker than blocker. I suppose it's okay. At the time, again, given the card pool, playing these decks against each other, I guess this would have been okay. A single Goblin Snowman, 3 in a red. I'm going to say, I think it's a real crime that this has never been errortard. Hard errortard to be a snow creature, but it is what it is. 3 in a red for a 1/1, which is obviously horrible stats. When Goblin Snowman blocks, it does not deal or receive combat damage that turn, which is such a weird thing to see on a red creature. Like any kind of like damage prevention, it like feels very anti-red. Taps do 1 damage to target creature it's blocking. So this is just a really, really roundabout way of like 4 mana for like a creature that doesn't take any damage when it blocks, but it can tap to do 1 damage to a creature it blocks. It's just so weird, like at 4 mana. But yeah, anyway. Single Raging Goblin, classic Raging Goblin, 1 red mana, 1/1 with haste, sure. Goblin Tinkerer, 1 red for a 1/2, and you pay 1 red and tap destroy target artifact. That artifact deals damage equal to its total cost to Goblin Tinkerer. So again, like the Scavenger Folk, fairly like efficient artifact destruction for the time, I suppose. This even better because this can kill off artifacts with mana value 0 or 1, and like it won't die like the Scavenger Folk does. So this is actually again like pretty okay, I think. By even by today's standards, I think it's all right because it's just the fact it's reusable, potentially. Then we've got Goblin Vandal, some 1 mana for a 1/1. You can pay 1 red, destroy target artifact defending player controls. Goblin Vandal deals no combat damage this turn. Uses this ability only if Goblin Vandal is attacking unblocked and only once each turn. So yeah, there was a whole like kind of bunch of creatures like this back in the day where if they got through unblocked, you could pay a certain amount of mana and you'd get the effect instead of them dealing damage. It was fine. I think Goblin Tinker is obviously better than this because it doesn't rely on being able to swing through and get through unblocked. So yeah, I think the Tinker is probably better in the long run. And then we have Goblin Digging Team, 1 red mana from 1/1. You can tap, sacrifice them to destroy target wall, which is the carnivorous plant if you're playing these decks against each other. Otherwise, it's just a 1/1 for 1. Might as well be the classic Mons Goblin Raiders. And then we've got Goblin Balloon Brigade, so 1 red mana from 1/1, pay 1 red to give it flying to end turn. Yeah, again, like really classic old Goblin card, I suppose. Yeah, it's okay. Again, for the time. I always think like this kind of like red ability to get flying to end turn. I feel like that needs to be used more. I think that could be a thing that red gets more often, maybe. I don't know. I'd like to hear what people think about that. Right, and then a Goblin Hero, 2 in a red, just for a 2/2 with no abilities. Yep. Just sure. Early magic. You're so wild. Right, and an Uthden Troll, 2 in a red for a 2/2. Pay 1 red and regenerate it. And like when you put it right next to Goblin Hero, it's just like, oh man, that's like that's not a fair comparison at all. Yeah, because Uthden Troll, like 1 red mana regeneration is like pretty solid, I think. And again, like red's not a color that gets regenerate that often. Well, at least it didn't. Early Magic, it was quite evenly split, like regeneration between essentially the Jund colors. I'd say even white got like a little bit of regeneration, and blue. Actually, thinking about it, regeneration really was like in every color at some point, which is really wild. Which is I expect why there were so many kind of cards that like either turned off regeneration or like ignored regeneration when it was like when it was a damage or like a kill spell or something. Yeah, regeneration used to be a lot more relevant, I think, in the game. And then a big volcanic dragon, 4 and double red, 4/4 flying haste. Sure, this is obviously just a big old beat stick. And then the original big old beat stick, Ice and Shade. So this used to be like the essentially like the I'm trying to think why, because the Gristle brand of its day, essentially like the big black iconic creature, like the big beat stick. And really, all he is 3 and triple black for a 5/5 pro white. And like that's, I'm not saying that's all. Yeah, that's all he is because it's still like a 5/5, I suppose, with no downside. And it's got pro white, but like it's just very charming. But that's that's kind of like all it was back in the day. Like whoa, like the Ice and Shade, such a powerful card. And like, is it? But yeah, it's nice to include in here as well because it was really iconic for the time. Not as iconic, I would say, as Hypnotic Spectre. So 1 and double black for a 2/2 flying. Whenever it deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card at random from his or her hand. Yep. So we're in the days still of turn 1 Dark Ritual, Swamp Dark Ritual, Hypnotic Spectre being such a strong opening play to do. So yeah, really nice to have Hypnotic Spectre in here. Then we got Black Knight, we got White Knight, so we had to have Black Knight, double black for a 2/2 first strike pro white. Kind of a shame it doesn't use the the original kind of more, I guess, historical, realistic looking Black Knight art, like from Alpha, because I think that's a nice. It would be a nice counterpart then to the White Knight art, where it's again using like that original Alpha art. I'm not sure what artwork this is actually. Maybe like fifth edition, possibly. Um, yeah, Black Knight is obviously still great as a classic Black Weenie. And then we got a single Cornbage Witches. I'm going to presume that's how it's pronounced. Double black for a 1/3. Tap does 1 damage to target creature or player of your choice, and 1 damage to target creature or player of an opponent's choice. So this is actually kind of like really cute, unique effect, I would say. Because it's what double black for a 1/3. So at the time, more efficient than I would say what yeah, like Prodigal Sorcerer, that kind of thing. So it is, I mean, it does get to do that ping ability early on. Obviously, yes, it pings something your opponent wants to do as well, but I suppose maybe back in the day, putting Spirit Link on this would have been okay as a sort of a very janky combo. Yeah, I think it's okay. And it actually got reprinted with lovely new artwork fairly recently. I want to say like in a Commander Legend set or something like that. So yeah, this is a nice inclusion as well. Single Knight of Stromgald, double black for a 2/1 pro white, very similar to the other White Knight. Was it Order of Leapbeard, Order of the White Shield? One of those. There were so many of these kind of like 2-pip knights like back in the day. Yeah, double black, pro white, 1 black to give it first strike 10/10, double black to give it +1/+0 10/10. And then a big janky legend from the legend set, Lady Orca. So 5, a black and a red for a 7/4. No other abilities. That's all it is. Just 7 mana for a 7/4. Because I guess when they first were designing like these like legendary cards and like multicolored cards, because Legends is the first set with multicolored cards. I don't know. There seemed to be this maybe idea that like, oh, the fact that it's a legend and that it's multicolored are actual like benefits, so it needs to cost more for that, which is like not true because if anything, I would say most of the time being multicolored and being legendary are restrictions. So really you should be getting more for what you pay, I suppose. But I say early Magic, they were trailblazers, they were pioneers. Obviously we know all this stuff now. It's easy to look back with hindsight and be like, oh, this is a bad card because these reasons. But yeah, they didn't know that at the time. And it's actually really, really nice that in Dominaria, the most recent Dominaria set, like Dominaria United, I think that's what it's called. They remade a bunch of these old legends, essentially gave them like retrains, to use a Yu-Gi-Oh term. So like Lady Orca it was like Orca Siege Demon, which was much better artwork, had brand new effect and stuff. So it was really nice that they took like some of those old legends and retrained them, which was really nice. Here is Lady Orca's just a big old beat stick, which it's still fine. Like it's still bigger than a lot of the creatures in the other deck. So as actual just raw muscle, it's absolutely fine, I think. And then a single Aesir Glider, 3 mana for 2/1 flying that can't block. Sure, it's flying, I suppose. It gives the deck something to do. Then we got Goblin Warrens, 2 and a red for an enchantment. You can pay 2 and a red, sacrifice 2 goblins, put 3 goblins into play. So again, we've got obviously plenty of goblins in the deck. So this is a way we can slowly turn more goblins, get more goblins out. And they get benefit from Goblin King, and yeah, it's fine. So it's going to be Goblins versus Pegasus in terms of tokens, I suppose. And then a single Goblin Offensive, X1 and double red. Put X goblins into play. They're 1/1 red creatures. Yep. Single Goblin Grenade, which is like, again, I keep saying this, but like even by today's standards, I think this is okay. 1 red mana, sorcery speed. You have to sacrifice a goblin as an additional cost, and it does 5 damage to target creature or player. So 1 red mana and sacrificing a goblin, of which you've got so many things that make goblin tokens, is really not much to pay for like 5 damage to a creature or player, because that's a really big amount of damage, especially at this time in the game where creatures just aren't as big. So this is almost always like a removal spell. But also just 5 damage like straight to the face. That could potentially be game out of nowhere. Single Lightning Bolt, lovely Lightning Bolts, 3 damage to a creature or player for any single red mana. Hard to get more efficient than that. Fireball, we've got to have Fireball. Again, another classic red burn spell, X and a red. Just a big X spell, and you can split the damage around however you want. Pyrokinesis. This is really nice, actually. 4 and double red. So you can exile a red card from your hand instead of paying its casting cost, and it does 4 damage divided any way you choose amongst any number of target creatures. So potentially really, really efficient here. You just exile like a trash little goblin or something that you don't want to play, and potentially 4 for 1, which is obviously super, super efficient, especially if you're spending like no mana to do it. And you've got Pyrotechnics, which is the slightly more balanced version. The fact you have to pay for it rather than exiling something. So Pyrotechnics 4 and a red does 4 damage divided any way you choose, makes any number of target creatures and or players. Yeah, so I mean it can also hit players, so it can also just be 4 to the face if needs be. I've always liked this. This flavor text has lived rent free in my head for absolute years, and I don't know why, but it's just a little personal story, I suppose. When I first saw this card back on the old Chandelar Micropose game back on PC back in the day, yeah, this flavor text just lives rent free in my head. I'm sure we've all got a card like that with the flavor text just lives rent free in our head. And then a single Hymn to Tuarak, double black. Target player discards 2 cards at random from his hand. What? How perfectly fair! 2 black mana to do a random discard 2. What an absolute amazing turn 2 drop that would be. Imagine! Can you just imagine? I think there is a Dark Ritual in here. We'll get to it in a minute, I suppose. But yeah, can you imagine like if you did Swamp, Dark Ritual, Hypnotic Spectre, second turn Swamp, Hymn to Tuarak, swim with Hypnotic Spectre, and that's 3 random discard on turn 2, which is just, oof, early Magic just took no prisoners, I suppose. Single Terror, still hyper efficient kill spell, 1 black to destroy a non-artifact, non-black creature. Yep. Single Unholy Strength, where this is the censored art because it did used to have like a big flaming pentagram behind him, but that was during the height of the Satanic Panic, so they took it out. So now he's just kind of stretching, which always gave my friends and I was a bit of a laugh. Be like, oh, Unholy Strength, just like, oh, just stretch out. Yeah, that's the Unholy Strength. It's just so funny. Like, why it just didn't maybe get new artwork or something, but anyway, it's still funny. It didn't have a Dark Ritual in it, which is a real shame. Oh well. And then a single Feast of the Unicorn, 3 and a black. Target creature gets +4/+0. It's an aura. So yeah, just really gives a real huge power boost. Although 4 mana is obviously really expensive, it's still an aura, so still inefficient. But like, yeah, it's still okay. And then a single. Oh, I'm gonna struggle with this pronunciation. Nevinyrals. I'm gonna stick it in the comments below how you pronounce this name. I'm going with Nevinyrral. Anyway, so here's disc. Again, real lovely classic artifact here. 4 mana, comes to play tapped, and you pay 1, tap it, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. It is not a sacrifice. Again, really important to notify. So if you find a way of making it indestructible, this is reusable, which is mean. So just point that out. I think this has been reprinted actually a few times as well in, again, recent Commander sets. But yeah, so wild that it's not a sacrifice when it absolutely probably should be. But yeah, so yeah, some potential there. And then also absolutely wild, Strip Mine. So in the other deck you had Armageddon, and now we've got Strip Mine here. Taps give you colours, or you can tap and sacrifice it, destroy target land. That's fair, right? Just a completely free Stone Rain effect. That's absolutely fine. What could be wrong with that? This is a mean deck with Hypnotic Spectre and Hymn to Tuarak and Strip Mine. And then we got Polluted Mire and Smouldering Crater for a bit of draw, and then 12 Mountains and 10 Swamps. And then this is really nice as well. This is it came with tokens, right? Because you've got all the effects that make Goblins and Pegasus tokens. So these, I think, would have come from Unglued. In fact, they definitely came from Unglued, which would have only just released. It would have been quite newish at the time. And Unglued was the first set to include tokens, really, and that was kind of just like I don't know if that was just like, oh, imagine if we made actual cards to represent tokens. How crazy is that? And like, obviously now these days that's like just the standard. You get a token in pretty much every booster pack. But yeah, it's just crazy to look at these old tokens and just like they just give zero information about like what the token does. Like no power, no toughness, no name, no creature type, like nothing. It's just some quite nice artwork, and that's it. And the borders, I guess, to show off like what color it's meant to be. But yeah, it's just so crazy. It just like doesn't give any actual stats for the stats that are used in game. Just wild, I think. Anyway, so that was a look at Anthologies, which is, I'd say, arguably the first ever dual deck. Yeah, and I don't know. Like looking about it, I think the decks are sort of all right considering they're such a mishmash of cards. Like from using all from all the sets that have been released up until then. There's some really nice cards in here. Like in terms of like reprint value, you had like Armageddon and like Never Niral's Disc and Strip Mine and stuff like that. So to us today, obviously this is like really got probably a lot of collector value because I say some of those cards are really old and really valuable. But yeah, at the time, I don't know where like those cards would have been considered as valuable, maybe because the game was still so new. It's kind of tough to say. But I still think like it was a nice product to release as a way of like celebrating 5 years of Magic. I think it's definitely one of the better ways of celebrating anniversary. Like I think we all remember the absolute train wreck the other year of the Masters proxy things. That was an absolute disaster. So yeah, Wizards definitely do stuff like this to celebrate anniversaries of your cash cow, I think. But I'd love to know, obviously, what you think about this set. Like, do you think this was like a good kind of initial prototype of the dual deck kind of format, or do you think it's maybe still like a bit rough? It could be refined a little bit as we saw like in Beatdown, as we're going to see in the future, like dual decks when I eventually get to them. It is crazy there were so many misprints as well, which is like really mad. But like if you had this set, like if you managed to get it as like a as a gift or something, either for yourself or you got it for a friend, if you played the decks they're in these those in the set like against each other, like absolutely stick a comment below if you got any thoughts about it at all, any kind of opinion or insight. I'd love to hear about this, essentially what is like the grandfather of dual decks, which I used to love so much, and so we will cover those one day, we will get to them. But I just thought, in this again sort of in between phase, I would use this as an opportunity to talk about again one of these obscure sets. I think this is a set that did deserve talking about and recognition in some way. And obviously that's obviously what this channel is all about, really. In this series, is just shedding some light on products that may have been forgotten but are still obviously important to the game's history. Anyway, rambling now. Stick a comment below. I'd love to know people's thoughts about this particular product. But yeah, I'll be back next time with the next bunch of content. I'm probably going to put this. Yeah, I think after this, it's going to be all the deck tech stuff. So really looking forward to how that's going to go with you guys. Hope you enjoy it. But and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to start working on the Mirage decks, I think. Anyway, really rambling now. I'm going to stop there. Hope you liked the video. Until next time, thanks for watching, listening, and have a great day.